On the last episode of the Lockdown Pistons podcast, we talked about why the switch everything defense I'm not a big fan of and don't believe it should continue to be the Pistons' main defense for this season. Well, today, James Edwards of The Athletic came out with an article after speaking with Dwane Casey about these issues and about the switch everything defense. So we have more to dive into. I really want to talk about this. Let's get into it in today's episode of the Lockdown Pistons podcast.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I'm your host, Kuka. You can find me over on Twitter at Kuka. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. And if you haven't already, head to our YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button, or you can leave a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you are listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. Don't you guys just hate when you guys have you have something planned and then you have to scrap everything last minute because something else came up and you have to tend to? That's basically what today's podcast was, because today's podcast, I wanted to talk about the GM survey that came out while I was gone getting married in Jamaica. I wanted to talk about that today, but I can't, because James Edwards of The Athletic came out with an article about the Pistons switch everything defense, and he spoke with Dwane Casey, and now I want to talk about it even more, and I have to fight back or push back on some of the things Dwane Casey said. And honestly, I'm cool with it because these are one of my favorite episodes. My favorite thing is breaking down basketball, like breaking down film. I love doing that. So this is one of my favorite episodes to do. I love doing that. So I'm going to have a lot of fun with it. But let's go ahead and get into it. So like I've mentioned twice already, again, James Edwards of The Athletic dropped an article. If you have an Athletic account, definitely go check it out. It was a great article by James. I'm not arguing with James. James isn't giving his opinion or saying this, that. He's just relaying to us what the idea is behind what Dwane Casey is doing and why he's doing it, etc. So I advise you guys to go read it. I'll link it in the bio below if you do have an Athletic account. But basically, I'm going to summarize what Dwane Casey said, and then I'm going to push back against it with some stats and my own feelings. Basically, what he was getting at, and it is a long article, so it's going to be hard to summarize everything. I really want to push for you guys to go read it. But basically, he was saying that you want teams to shoot non-paint twos or just twos. He says in here, quote, "You can't make enough twos in today's game unless you're fouling to beat them, like to beat an opposing team." He goes on to say that it's not going to be their only scheme, but this is going to be like their main part of their scheme. Talked about how it kind of limits 3-point attempts, and they point to how many threes opposing teams were getting up against them last year, how low that is compared to all the other teams in the NBA. They allowed the 5th least amount of threes per game of any team in the NBA last year. So yes, I think that's enough to summarize it. I think I can dive into why I disagree in his points now. So yes, if you switch everything, you probably will limit threes, or at least you'll try to limit open threes. That's the idea. You won't get a lot of threes will be pull-up threes. You're assuming threes created off the dribble, step backs, that kind of stuff. Because if you're switching off-ball screens, you're switching on-ball screens, there's going to be no real space for a guy to just walk into a three, step into a three, or catch and shoot a three, because you're constantly switching. No one's going to get stuck on any screens, all that kind of thing. So that, yes, I get that idea, and it makes sense to a degree if you have the right personnel for it. Now, again, like I said, the Pistons did allow the 5th fewest 3-point attempts a game last season at 32.5. However, the teams did shoot 36.2%, which was pretty high in the league. I believe it ranked 8th in the NBA, 8th highest percentage. But if you're giving up a few amount of threes, I guess it counteracts each other. But what I really want to push back with Dwane Casey is the idea that you can't lose by giving up too many twos. If you're basically, and this goes back to the offense too, the offense has to keep up with that, I guess, in order to make them just getting twos not worth it. I push back against that idea tremendously, because I think while we're in an analytics era now, analytics are a big deal now, and I like analytics. They have a place. I feel like people confuse what analytics are. It's not just shoot threes and get threes up. The best shot in basketball, and analytics will support this, eye test will support this, people who play basketball will support this. The best shot in basketball is an open layup. And the first point I'm going to make is that if you switch everything with the personnel that the Detroit Pistons have, they don't have personnel that can handle switching out all their players on the perimeter. They have bad perimeter defenders. They don't have very many good perimeter defenders. So constantly getting bad perimeter defenders switched out on guards is giving up dribble penetration, and that will lead to open layups either for the guy getting to the rim or a guy, he's dumping it off to somebody because now the big has to rotate. Whoever's down low, because it may not even be the big now because they switched out. Whoever has to help over, now is a dump off happening. Now he's getting a layup. Nonetheless, open layups are the best shot in basketball. So I'm going to push back against the idea that it's okay if you're just giving up those twos. He did say non-paint twos, but then he went on to say just or really twos in general. So I don't agree with that, first off. Second point I want to make is again about the personnel that the Detroit Pistons have. If the Detroit Pistons had fine perimeter defenders, if they had guys who could switch down low and kind of handle themselves down low and switches, then then I could get behind it. It'd make more sense. But really, one of the only guys, like I would say Killian does a good job of switching down low on the big guys as a guard. Cade, I guess, but Cade is also not as I don't think Cade is as strong as Killian. He might, but Cade also fouls a lot more than Killian, and he's not as good of a defender as Killian is. So I don't know if you'd like Cade constantly getting himself in that kind of situation. Outside of Killian, I don't know any other really. Is there anyone else that's undersized that you want switched out on or switched down low that can handle themselves? I don't think so. And then outside of Isaiah Stewart, do they have any other big that you trust switching out on the perimeter consistently? No. And another thing that Dwane Casey pointed to in this article, or he was asked about, he gave an answer to, was that the team and the young players, since they're so young, they're not so good with rotations, which, remember, this is why I said I believe why they did it last year, because I felt like that Dwane Casey was basically saying we have a bunch of young players, making the defense too complex would be too hard for them. So let's just keep it simple and do all switching nonstop. Last year, okay, whatever. I was cool with it because they were basically tanking. This year, this is the problem with this. And I like breaking this down because, like I said at the beginning, I like breaking down basketball. If you're switching everything, you're going to be dealing with rotations nonetheless if you don't have the personnel to deal with this. For example, let's go back to the Pels game. If you are switching out consistently, Cade Cunningham, Corey Joseph, Jaden Ivey, or anyone else onto Jonas Valanciunas and Zion Williamson on the block, what happens? You have to bring a second defender, which you saw the Pistons do a lot. What happens when you bring a second defender and have to double team somebody? Someone's going to cut to the rim, or someone's going to be open amongst the three-point line because you're basically playing 3-on-4 now. And what does that mean? That means you have to do rotations to make up for that. If he throws it out to the three-point line, a guy has to make his rotation to the open guy, and then you have to trust that the second defender has his second rotation to get to the corner or wherever the first defender rotated to. So let's go ahead and just put a situation out there. Jonas Valanciunas gets doubled on the block. He kicks it out to the open three-point shooter who's at the top of the key. Saddiq Bey rotates from the right wing to the center, the center of the court to cover that shooter. He has to now hope that the defender from the right corner is going to make his second rotation to the guy Saddiq Bey just left at the right wing. So my point is, and then also, again, if you're switching, it does the same thing here. If you switch bad perimeter defenders like Marvin Bagley or Saddiq Bey consistently out on perimeter guys, and they're constantly giving up dribble penetration, you want to know what causes rotations the most in the NBA? Dribble penetration. And if you're constantly giving up dribble penetration over and over and over, you are giving up kickouts. And how do you defend kickouts? You have to hope the guy rotates over, and then you have to hope someone has your backside rotation. So the whole idea of we're switching so we don't have to worry about making rotations because it's going to be too complex for the young guys, they won't get it, blah, blah, blah. That still doesn't make sense to me, because if you don't have the personnel to do it, you're still putting your team in a position where they're constantly going to be having to make rotations nonetheless because of double teams, because of dribble penetration that happens nonstop. So I'm not going to lie. The limiting threes, I can get that. I can understand that. That makes sense from a basketball scheme wise. It makes sense from the eye test and numbers wise. I understand that. But I think it's counterproductive because if you may be limiting threes, but if you're giving up everything else, it's like, is it really worth it at that point? And there's other teams that have defensive schemes that are giving up. They purposely give up threes because they don't believe that you're going to hit enough threes, and threes are a harder shot to make. While getting open threes is a good shot, analytics wise, and obviously in the team offense, the best 3-point shooters shoot what, like 38% from deep? An open layup's like a 90% shot. So basically, teams give up threes because they don't believe you're going to hit enough of them to beat them if their offense can keep up. There's different sides of this coin to it. So I get why you're doing the switch defense from that perspective, but everything else doesn't make sense to me, even a little bit. And when we come back, I'm going to bring some stats to further prove my point. All of you guys should stick around. I can't wait to get into these stats because I really think this is going to obliterate, or I don't want to say obliterate because that kind of sounds like I'm trying to disrespect Dwane Casey. I'm not trying to disrespect Dwane Casey. I don't agree with what he's putting out there. The switch everything defense, I don't agree with his explanation. So this is just me rebutting against it. And I think these stats I'm going to bring up in the next segment will really do a great job of doing so. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that. But first, I have to go to the ad break and tell you guys a little bit about one of our sponsors, your guys' favorite sponsor, Built Bar. If you haven't tried Built Bar Puffs yet, you are depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys. And guess what? There's a new flavor. Are you ready for it? It's delicious, indulgent cookie dough. Covered in chocolate, that's right, Built has done it again. Let me introduce you to their new favorite, cookie dough chunk puffs. Have a light and chewy texture, real cookie dough chunks, and of course, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. All of the joys of eating cookie dough without the hassle of having to make it. Plus, it's extremely healthy for you. Cookie dough chunk puffs are only 160 calories and they have a whopping 15 grams of protein in them. Run to Built.com to snag a box for you and the family. It will be the perfect treat. Or you can find a really good hiding place in your house and just hoard them all for yourself. Like all Built Bars, again, the new cookie dough chunk puff is covered in 100% real chocolate, which means they're healthy and they're incredibly tasty. Chocolate-covered cookie dough with light, fluffy texture tastes absolutely amazing. You're going to love the new cookie dough chunk puff, whether you need a snack for your workout, a late-night treat, or just need to grab a quick bite. Built is the perfect protein bar, and they taste better than a candy bar, and they're better for you. Ditch the calories, the fat, and the sugar, and grab yourself a Built Bar. Go to Built.com, use promo code LOCKEDON15 and get 15% off your order. Again, go to Built.com, use promo code LOCKEDON15 and get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCKEDON15. Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar ever. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. And if you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button. It's the best way to support the podcast. Or you can leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you are listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. All right, so I didn't expect this to go as long as it was, but I started really getting into gear. I really got emotional. I really like talking about this. So we're going to skip the other segment I was going to have, and we're going to get right back into the defense because I wasn't even able to get into all the stats I wanted to get into here. So with the switch everything defense, here's another thing that comes of it. And like I said in the last episode, Antonio Daniels, he's a member of the Lockdown Network, but he also broadcasts the Pelicans games. And he was doing an excellent job of bringing this up, is that not only all the points I brought up in the first segment happen, if you're constantly switching everything, especially against the team that has a competent big guy, he is going to absolutely obliterate you on the boards and second chance points because he's going to have a guard on him or someone undersized on him. So it doesn't matter. Even if your big guy that switched down the perimeter is able to get a stop, it's more than likely that big guy that has an undersized dude on him is going to get the offensive rebound. And it's either going to get fouled or a putback dunk, putback layup, whatever you want to choose. So that right there, the Pistons are constantly putting themselves in disadvantages by doing this. Let me go ahead and bring these stats for you guys here. Again, remember that Dwane Casey said the reason why they do this is to limit three-point attempts, which again, it makes sense. It does do that. It does indeed do that. I guess I shouldn't say it makes sense because I still disagree with the idea that it's better served this way. But the reasoning for it does happen, I should say. That does happen when you do a switch everything defense. You should limit threes because it's going to be harder to get threes off screens and all that kind of stuff. However, let's say, like the Pistons are only giving up 32.5 three-point attempts a game. The opposing team is only making around 12 three-pointers a game, which is ninth least in the NBA. Is it worth it if you're also giving up 49.7 points in the paint, which is 8th most in the NBA? Is it worth it if you're 29th in defensive rebounds grabbed per game? Is it worth it if you're 26th in defensive rebound percentage? Is it worth it at that point? Because the idea that you can just give up as many twos and twos won't beat you is just not true. It's not true at all. It's completely false. An open two or an easy two is still the best shot in basketball. It has the highest percentage shot in the league. Analytics will agree with that. Eye test will agree with that. So yes, you're giving up few threes, but is it worth it if you're giving up all of that as well? My answer would be no. And just to go back real quick, I know he said that he eventually went on to say just overall twos, but he started off with saying they want to give up non-paint twos. Again, if you had the personnel to do so, that would make sense. But when you're switching out Marvin Bagley, when you're switching out Bojan Bogdanovic, when you're starting Bojan Bogdanovic and Saddiq Bey in the same lineup, when you're starting Marvin Bagley and or Saddiq Bey and Bojan in the same lineup, and you're constantly getting them switched out on quicker, faster, better offensive players on ball, you're not forcing non-paint twos because they're going to get beat off the dribble every single time. Why take a non-paint two when you can just beat by the guy? You're not going to give up non-paint twos. The idea behind it is that if you switch somebody out on the perimeter, you can force them into taking a pull-up jumper because they can't, in drop coverage, you can get them sometimes, you give up the runner or you give up the floater, that kind of thing. If you trap, you put yourself in 3-on-4 situations. If he hits the roller, then if the roller's good enough, you can find the open shot, etc. Maybe the lob, etc., like you see with the Warriors. So that's the idea behind it. But if the guys who are switching out there are so piss poor, they're going to get dribble penetration either way, just easier this way. Sorry, I just hit my mic. They're going to get easier penetration than I think they would originally versus any other defensive coverage. And then this is the stat that I really want to hammer home. I feel like this really obliterates this completely. I think this really will show that this is what the Pistons get killed by the most. And it gets talked about last year a lot. It's already being talked about in preseason. And it's getting put on the players. But I'm going to push back and say it's not on the players. It's on the coaching staff and the positions they're putting them in. And that's fouling. Yes, some of the players get too antsy with their hands. Yes, they do have to improve on getting too antsy with their hands and not playing defense with their feet rather than their hands. Yes, that is a habit that they still have. They are young. That happens. However, they're fouling so much because they're constantly being put at disadvantages defensively in mismatches. And I've played basketball my whole life. Anyone who's played basketball their whole lives and have played at high level, whether that's high school, college, JUCO, and whether you play at any structured high-level basketball, varsity basketball, if you can't guard somebody, what do? You foul. If you can't stay in front of somebody, you try to get in front of them, but you can't, and you foul them. If they get to the paint, you foul them. When you can't play defense on somebody, you foul, whether you do it on purpose or accidentally. It just happens because you can't guard them, and you end up fouling. And the best way to show this is the fact that the Pistons were giving up, where is it? I just lost 25.1 free throw attempts per game last year. That's the second most in the entire NBA. In the entire NBA. If you're doing that and you're giving up the 8th most points in the paint and you're not getting any rebounds, what were they? What was the stat I said for the defensive rebounds? 29th in defensive rebounds grabbed per game, 26th in defensive rebound percentage. You're giving up points in the paint and you're giving up free throws. Quite literally, free throws and layups are the best shot in basketball. That's literally what you need, what analytics say you push for. It's what every scorer needs to be able to do. Literally be able to get to the paint, get layups, and be able to get to the free throw line. And the Pistons are doing those two things the most on defense than any other team, basically. So yes, you're limiting threes, but you're also doing everything else you should not be doing that's maybe just as, if not more important to your defense. And this is not, again, some of the players do get antsy with their hands. Some of the players do need to be better with that. But when you got Corey Joseph, when you got Cade Cunningham last year, when you got Frank Jackson or Hamidou Diallo, or even this year with Jay and Ivy, when you're constantly putting them on big guys, dudes like Zion, Jonas Valanciunas, or any team with a competent big that knows how to go up with a guard on them, you're going to get foul calls. You're going to get guys trying to reach in because they can't body them, or you're going to get guys buying them pump fakes. That's what's going to happen. When you get a big guy out on the perimeter who can't guard their the offensive player on the perimeter, guess what's going to happen? They're not going to be able to shuffle their feet. They're going to bump them off their drive and get called for a foul. They're going to chase down from behind, try to go for a block, and foul them. That's what's going to happen over and over and over again. So yes, Dwane Casey, you are limiting three-point attempts by doing this. And usually if you limit three-point attempts, you would say, okay, that's a win. They're not making too many threes on us. They're not bombing us out their arena, which is, I guess, cool. That does help sometimes, depending on what defensive scheme you want to believe in. Like I said earlier, there are defensive schemes. I believe the Milwaukee Bucks were one of them over the past few years that give up threes. They just don't think that they give up threes to the right people, and they don't think those people will make them enough to make you pay rather than getting like 90% shots in the paint, etc. However, it won't matter, and it doesn't matter when you, one, don't have the personnel, and two, you are giving up the easiest points in basketball. When you're giving up the easiest points analytically, you're giving up 25.1 free throw attempts a game. 25.1, second worst in the league. When teams have a mismatch that they can attack every single possession, and your players are being put in a mismatch every single possession, you're going to get free throws called. You're going to get fouls called. You're putting your players at a disadvantage. You just are. This is putting your defense at a disadvantage and putting your players at a disadvantage almost every defensive possession. And I want to make this clear. I said this on the last episode. Every team in the NBA switches to a degree, but they don't soft switch every single thing, especially if they don't have the personnel to do so. Especially if they don't have the personnel to do so. They don't do that. If the Pistons had the personnel to do it, I wouldn't be complaining about it because then it would make sense. Then you wouldn't have to worry about them constantly. If they were the Toronto Raptors and they had a ton of 6'8", 6'7" long wings who can switch out on the perimeter and also handle their own down low without fouling 1,000 times a game, then okay, I'd be okay. That makes sense. You use what you got. But I've told you guys this before in the podcast. I'm a big believer, and I know this is a different opinion amongst people. Have different opinions with coaching and how they go about things. This is my opinion. I believe a coach is supposed to put the players that they have in a system that works best for them, not take their system and force their players to work into their system. I think you go out there and you get a system that's best for the players that you have. So to think that this is the best system for what the players have now, I don't see how you can accurately look at that and look at the numbers from last year and already look through 2 preseason games, how that's working, and think that would make sense. I don't know how you could make that argument. I don't see it. If you can, go in the comment section or tweet at me and tell me how you can make that argument. I don't see it. I don't see it at all. And lastly, I know I went on a little too long in this second segment. I know also in the article, and again, you guys really need to read the article so you guys can get the whole argument for it. I don't want to be cutting him short. I can't read the entire article on the podcast. So again, make sure you guys check it out if you do have an Athletic subscription. But one of the things that was mentioned in there is that they believe this will be what they run in a few years from now. Switch everything. They want to have players on their team that can switch across 1 through 5, 1 through 4, eventually when they get to the playoffs and are contending. I don't think that matters right now because you don't know if any of these players, one, will be on that team in a few years from now when you want to run switch everything. Two, the players on this team cannot switch everything, quite literally. So that doesn't make sense to me, too. And three, if you want that to be your system in a few years and what you want to do when you're contending, you clearly need to go get some different players. Because you don't have them right now. Saddiq Bey is not one of those dudes. Marvin Bagley is not one of those dudes. You just gave him 3 years, $13 million a year. He's not one of those dudes. So if that's what your idea is for what the defense is going to be in 2 years, I'm questioning why you got the guys you got then. Why did you give Marvin Bagley 3 years, $13 million a year if that's what you want to run in the playoffs and you're expecting him to be a big role? Why did you do that? It's like it doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't. So again, if you have an argument for it, let me know in the comment section down below, or you can tweet at me at Kuka Hill. But guys, I'm not feeling it. And this is not me attacking Dwane Casey. This is Dwane Casey. I'm not trying to say he's a terrible coach. This is me just pushing back against some of his ideas and his defensive scheme. I feel like I did a pretty good job at that. And again, I'm going to say it one more time. I just don't see the argument for it. I don't. When we come back, Kemba Walker is being a real pain in the bleep for the Pistons. He's refused a buyout. What happens now with Kemba Walker? It's minor news, but that's why it's in the third block. But yeah, we'll talk about that when we come back. Let me tell you a little bit about one of our sponsors, PrizePicks. Let's go ahead and just throw a situation out there. Let's say tonight I'm taking Luka Doncic to score more than 26.5 points. LeBron James to have more than 7.5 rebounds. Kevin Durant to have less than 6.5 assists. Or Steph Curry to have more than 3.5 three-pointers made. I want to do all of that into one single parlay. Well, guess what? You can do that with PrizePicks. You can pick 2 to 5 players, and to guess if they will score more or less than their PrizePicks projection. You can win up to 10 times your money on any single entry. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projected numbers. PrizePicks offers projections of any numbers or any sport, I should say, that you watch. This includes NBA, NFL, MLB, NHL, PGA, college football, men's college basketball, women's college basketball, soccer, WNBA, esports, NASCAR, tennis, MMA, boxing, disc golf, Euro basketball, cricket, and more. And that was already a mouthful right there, but they even have more sports than that. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's really just that easy. Safe and easy, fast withdrawals. Currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. So go download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports today. First-time users can receive 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with our promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100 back. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter our promo code LOCKEDON at sign-up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Again, use our code LOCKEDON to get an instant deposit match up to $100 at PrizePicks. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. And if you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons, hit that subscribe button, or you can hit us with 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you are listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. I got something in my eye, and it's really irritating me. My goodness. All right, so Kemba Walker is still technically on the roster for the Detroit Pistons. And according to Gary Washburn of the Boston Globe, Kemba Walker has refused the buyout with the Detroit Pistons. And he was at, I believe, a Boston Celtics game the other day. I believe it was the Celtics game. And he was asked about, does he plan on retiring? Is he done playing basketball? What's going on with him right now? Does he plan on playing basketball this year? Like, what's going on? And he basically said that he wants to play basketball. He wants to play basketball now. He wants to play basketball this year. He believes he has a few years left in him, and he's not looking forward to retiring. However, he hasn't gotten any calls from any teams. He hasn't heard any interest from any teams. And if you guys remember, it was probably a few months ago now, maybe last month, I think it was. Actually, was it just a few weeks ago? I'm losing track of time. It could have been just a few weeks ago, or maybe a month and a half ago or something, that we talked about this on the podcast. That, one of you guys, I think it was in a mailbag, you guys asked what's going on with Kemba Walker. And I said that I had heard, and I had heard, then the Athletic had reported, and I believe also the Detroit News reported. I could be wrong with that last one, but either way, that the Pistons were planning on buying out Kemba Walker. Oh, no, I remember who said it. James Edwards on his podcast, the Bun and Cardigan podcast, said that it takes two to tango. Basically, the Pistons would like to buy out Kemba Walker, but Kemba apparently may not be finding interest from other teams, so he doesn't want to buy out. So it's just speculation at that point. And then now you hear this today or the last few days, and it sounds like that's right. So in order for the Pistons to buy out Kemba Walker, he has to agree to it. And it doesn't sound like he's going to do that until he feels like another team is going to want to pick him up, is going to want to sign him. And I'm going to repeat what I said whenever we recorded that podcast. I don't get the idea about this. I really don't get how this does anything for Kemba, or it makes any sense really to me. I'm sure there's something there's probably like some salary cap thing or some like secret cap rule that I don't know about that maybe makes it make a little bit more sense. But my whole thinking is the Pistons aren't playing you. Whether you agree to the buyout or not, the Pistons aren't going to play you. Like, you're not going to be with the team. They're not playing you. So whether you agree to a buyout or not, you're not playing basketball. And when you do get bought out, you are going to become a free agent, and you are going to be available to anyone out there. So what is waiting for a team to be interested changing from just getting bought out right now and then waiting for a team to be interested? I don't see how this is like helping him, how this makes anything play out differently. You get bought out, now you're a free agent, you wait for a team to call. You're not playing basketball until a team calls you. You refuse to get bought out, you're still not playing basketball, as the Pistons aren't going to play you, and you're waiting for a team to reach out, and then they'll buy you out, and then you'll be able to go play basketball. So nothing's changing in either scenario. You're still not playing basketball, and you're still waiting for a team to be interested in you. Except one scenario, you're already a free agent, and you'll be capable, I should say, to sign with any team as soon as they give you interest. I don't understand. I mean, maybe, I guess, you continue to get your full salary until a team shows that they're interested. I guess that's why he doesn't want to agree to the buyout yet. But like, I don't know, man. It doesn't make any sense to me. I think all you guys need to know is that Kemba Walker is not going to play any minutes with the Detroit Pistons. They're going to have to find something, whether it's waiving, stretching him, or just flat out waiving him, because they have to cut their roster down to 15. And if he's not going to agree to a buyout, they're still at 16. So I don't know what they're going to do. Kemba's being a real pain in the side right now with this. It doesn't make any sense to me. It's kind of an annoyance at this point, to be honest. But hopefully a team ends up reaching out and wants Kemba, so the Pistons can finally buy him out and get him off the roster, so they don't have to worry about having 16 guys and don't have to waive them or waive and stretch them. That would really suck if the Pistons had to waive and stretch them. I'd much prefer them just be able to buy him out. But Kemba wants to be like this. So either way, that's the update with Kemba Walker. That's all I've got for you guys on today's episode. Enjoy the preseason game tonight against the Oklahoma City Thunder. Hopefully that's going to be a lot of fun. I believe this one is indeed on Bally Sports Detroit, so you'll be able to watch it on there. If not, I don't advise you guys do anything else and in order to watch the game, like going on to a site. That would be incredibly bad to do. Don't do that. That's not what you should do. You definitely shouldn't be going to any kind of streaming site to watch anything. Don't do that at all. If it's not on Bally Sports Detroit, you're just going to have to watch along in the ESPN app and watch the box score. So that's what you're going to have to do if it's not on Bally Sports Detroit. But that's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. Hit the subscribe button to the YouTube channel. 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. And until next time, I'll see you guys later. Peace out, everybody, and go Pistons.